Let's get it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, Zach SchuZ, Shoemaker, and joining today is a man that holds an 11-0 record with 9 KOs. He's the current number 5 ranked super middleweight by the WBC. He's also the WBC International Super Middleweight Champion with an upcoming fight on May 23rd, Luka Plantic. Luka, appreciate you taking time to come on today, man.
Thank you. Thanks so much. You call me.
Absolutely, man. Well, as I just said, you have a fight on May 23rd, a couple of days out. What's going through your mind right now?
Now it's relax and wait to fight, and we see. To Friday, we know I going to win.
Mm.
We see everything.
How exciting is it for you to be fighting in your home country? 'Cause I have to imagine it's a special thing, being home, being with your people, your family. How exciting is it to be able to fight at home?
Very excited because I must have good Croatia people, Croatia fans,
Mm.
and everything. I must people good fight give, and too many people love me. And after that, I go to maybe USA and we see.
I want to ask you about just being able to represent your home country because obviously you're becoming one of the top fighters in the country, regardless of where you're at. But now, especially in Croatia, you're one of the faces of Croatian boxing right now. When you talk about representing your country, whether that's fighting in Croatia, outside of the country, what does it mean to represent Croatia?
Croatia is beautiful country,
Hmm.
small country,
Right.
4 million people, and Croatia have good boxers,
Hmm.
good sport. In football, boxing, every sport in Croatia, it's good sport.
When you talk about being someone that people can look up to in Croatia, what does that mean to you?
Um Repeat,
Yeah.
please.
So when you think about just the fact that people like younger kids and people look up to you as someone that's a great boxer in Croatia that you get to represent, and people kind of want to be the next Luka Plantic, and people are kind of looking at you as a role model, what does that mean to you?
For me, it's everything because I'm I'm it's guy who coming in the small country,
Hmm.
and I want to my country uh, good in war.
Hmm.
I want to my country represent good.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into your upcoming fight because you have a fight just coming up on Friday against Bruno Costa, who's 11-0, 8 KOs by himself. What's your thoughts on your opponent?
It's good guy. He
Hmm.
have 22 years old.
Yep.
It's young. It's fast. It's good record, and I think with my the Thunder name, it's everything for him because my aggression, my fight, it's only for going up.
Hmm. I want to ask you about your prediction on the fight because obviously we're a few days out. When we're at the end of the day, on May 23rd, after the main event, when you're done fighting, what's your prediction how that fight goes down?
After that, or
Oh, yeah. So, like, what do you think your prediction on the fight that's going to happen on May 23rd against you and Bruno Costa?
it's possible repeat.
Yeah, yeah. So, for your upcoming fight against Bruno Costa, what's your prediction on how that fight's going to go?
We see. I talk in the ring.
Hmm.
We see everything in the ring
Okay.
because I now say everything in ring is different. I
Mm.
only talking in the ring, no outside.
Okay. I love that, man. Now, in terms of your statement, when you talk about after the fight on May 23rd, what do you want people to be thinking about Luka Plantic about? Like, what do you want the statement to be that you make in that ring on May 23rd?
Uh, I don't know. I don't know. I want. It's possible repeat.
Yeah, definitely. So when you talk about what you want people to think about your performance, what do you want people to take away from the way Luka Plantic fights on May 23rd? What do you want people to take away from your fight and your performance?
Good fight.
Hmm.
Good fight because my performance it's good, and I want to Acosta good performance
Hmm.
and good fight for people for world.
All right. I also want to get into a couple other things about you because before this fight got announced, there were some rumors that you and Christian and Billy were going to possibly begin a mix for a fight. What happened there? Why did that fight not come to fruition?
It's possible repeat my dog.
Oh, no worries. When you talk about Christian and Billy, he was somebody that you guys were rumored about possibly fighting. What happened and why did the fight with Christian and Billy not end up happening?
He want I come to Canada
Okay.
for small money
Mm,
and fight for WC World Champion. It's it's not good. It's
right.
possible we go to fight in the USA, Riyadh. It's no problem for me
Okay.
because it's good money, good everything. Promoter, it's funny.
So you're saying we could possibly see you and Christian and Billy later on if everything goes according to plan in this next fight on Friday. We could possibly see you and Billy if it's a Riyadh season card with either in the United States or somewhere else. Then
Yes, why not?
okay. The other person you're possibly rumored to fight was Vasilis Iglesias. That was something for the WBC title belt. What happened with that fight?
Also,
Okay,
small money.
gotcha.
Small money. I'm number four. Iglesias number three.
Hmm.
It's small money. I coming to Canada for what? For nothing.
Hmm. When you look at what you want to do after this, obviously you have to go take your opponent against Acosta seriously. Obviously, you have to get past him first. I don't want you looking too past him. But if everything goes according to plan in that fight, is there something that you want? Is there one fighter that you look at 168 that you want to go out there and fight?
What you mean?
Or a middleweight division? Is there somebody that you want to fight specifically? Is there somebody that you have your eyes on that you'd want to fight at middleweight?
Yes, I want to fight only for Canelo.
Okay.
Canelo, Mungia, Mimbili, Pacheco. For me, it's not problem. I fight who come to me. I fight, no problem.
Okay. So you said something interesting there, and that's the Canelo Alvarez part. Obviously, nobody knows exactly what Canelo is going to be doing, but the unique thing is that he's fought, I believe, 3 or 4 different fighters. Has had the WBC International Super Middleweight Championship before. You hold that belt right now. What would it be like to possibly go out there and fight Canelo?
Uh, One moment. Mm. Maybe we look maybe another year 26. We
Okay.
fight maybe with Canelo.
All right.
We see because after Canelo Crawford, maybe Canelo go because Mexican news, USA news say Canelo going to finish boxing. We
Mhm.
see.
For yourself, you mentioned the other guys, Munguia, you talked about and Billy. When you talk about, as you said, Canelo could possibly be retiring at the end of 2026. That means that the belts would all open up for yourself. If it's not Canelo that you don't get a fight, is there something that you could see yourself really wanting to fight next after Costa?
I want to fight uh, Mungia
Okay.
and Berlanga.
All right. What
I
would be
want
your,
to fight.
if you get one of those fights, how do you see the fight going with Munguia and how do you see the fight going with Berlinga?
I think KO.
All right. I love it, man. Well, let's get into a couple more things before I let you go. One of which is that if I were to ask you, the next 12 to 18 months of your life, you're still obviously in the physical prime for yourself. When you look at the next 12 to 18 months for yourself, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to get done over the next year and a half?
I want to big fight to for 4 5 months. I want to
Mhm.
big fight, and another year I want world champion.
All right. You said something cool that you could possibly come to the United States earlier in this interview. Is that the big fight you're talking about? Could we see you come to the United States, fight out here by the end of the year?
Yes,
Okay. And is there any rumors
we
about?
talk. We talk after this fight because my promoter say after that we look everything for USA, maybe for Riyadh.
Okay. And is one of those fights possibly going to be Christian and Billy? I know you talked about those guys. Would it be somebody like an Billy, a Pacheco, a Munguia? Would that be some of the guys you could possibly be fighting in that fight?
Maybe Mungia.
Okay. I love it, man.
We look after that fight. We look maybe Mungia.
Perfect. Well, I've got one final question for you, Luka, and that's something I always like wrapping up every interview with, and it's talking about your legacy. When you move on from boxing, you step away from the game of boxing, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want your legacy to be for what you accomplished both inside and outside of the ring?
I want to be coach. I want to be manager. I want to present in my country to new boxers going up and present it to world.
Absolutely, man. I love that. Well, Luka, best of luck on your upcoming fight on this weekend on Friday. I can't wait to see what guys got in store
Thank
for
you.
you, and I appreciate you taking time to come on today, man.
Thank you so much.
Of course, you're always welcome on, man. God bless.
No worries. Bye bye.
Bye bye, Luka. See you, man. I appreciate everyone for tuning into that interview. I'll get that edited out and clipped out so you guys can go check it out later on my YouTube channel. I'm going to go on a short break, then we'll get into the rest of the show. See you guys shortly. What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, SchuZ Shoemaker, and welcome back to the SchuZ Show. I know we got right into the interview with Luka here to start off the show, and I just want to give a big shout out to Luka again. Obviously, there was a little bit of a language barrier there, but yet he pushed through. He came on the show, and we had a great interview. So, for those that have not seen the interview yet, I'm going to go get that edited out, clipped up on my YouTube channel very, very shortly. With that being said, though, I hope you guys had an incredible weekend. I talked to you guys on Friday, and we talked about how the fact that, there weren't necessarily mega fights this weekend. I know there weren't world championship fights or anything along those lines this weekend. But this weekend not just be fun. Well, this was a phenomenal weekend of boxing. Let's just put it that way. It was a great weekend, actually. And I want to break that down for you guys. So to give you guys a quick how the rest of the show is going to go before we go any further, I'm going to give you guys a fight breakdown of what happened this weekend, get into some fight news, and then we're going to get into the interview with Thomas Treiber, and that's going to be a fun interview because I've talked about this before. I've had on boxers, I've had on trainers, I've had on coaches, I've had on managers, I've had on promoters, but we've not had a ring announcer on yet. That changes today. So we'll get into that interview to wrap up the show. But with that being said, though, let's get right into this card now. Fisher versus Allen to the card. All right, this is what we had set up for this weekend. It was a lot of guys that we talked about were up-and-coming prospects in the British scene. My apologies. And on top of that, we were going to finish off with a rematch of a fight that was heavily controversial. And I will always say this: a promoter's dream is for controversy. This fight had controversy leading into it, and boy, did it deliver. For those of you that have not yet seen it, I recommend you go and check out. If you can't watch the whole fight, at least watch the grand finale, the KO by Dave Allen of Johnny Fisher in the 5th round, right at the bell with a hook, a left hook to be specific. Absolutely phenomenal display there in this fight. Now, Fisher was ahead on the scorecards before the stoppage. It could be debatable there, but that's what it was. Let's set up the scene for this fight. Dave Allen is one of the most beloved fighters in the British scene. And I think overall he's starting to grow around the rest of the world. But when you talk about the British scene, Dave Allen is beloved. And in this fight, he had a chance to go fight Johnny Fisher, one of the biggest up-and-coming, you could say, prospects to a certain extent that was coming in the matchroom scene. And they head out to Riyadh season on the undercard for Usyk and Fury, and they fight, and it was a very, very controversial loss for Dave Allen. Many would have said at least it was a draw, but possibly even Dave Allen winning that fight. I'm not getting into the specifics of that controversy there. The point is that Johnny Fisher probably does not deserve that win and should either have a draw or a loss on his loss column heading into this fight, and that maybe would have prevented that fight from even occurring. But here we go. Johnny Fisher gets that win, and everybody knew it was very controversial. And so what happens? Well, we set up a fight for a rematch on Saturday. And I will say this. Johnny Fisher was the guy that, of course, people were favoring to win for a long time. Johnny Fisher was the bigger name from the standpoint of what was being pushed to the media by Matchroom and by those that are covering the sport. He was pushed as this next big British heavyweight. Those of you that have watched it knew that he was not quite that prospect that I think he probably was proclaimed to be. Some were a little bit higher on him than others, but still, Johnny Fisher was pushed to be this elite up-and-coming guy. To the fact even where I will say this, I am shocked because the WBA and WBO at this moment in time, now it will change very shortly, have Johnny Fisher ranked in the top 15. And that could either be because of the fact that the heavyweight division is not very deep, but also by the fact that, listen, I think he was a little bit overhyped. And we head into this fight, and Dave Allen had a chance to redeem himself. And here's what I will always say to a fighter. When controversy occurs, which is boxing, controversy, unfortunately, will always be a part of the sport. But what I must suggest is this. How are you going to handle business when you get back in that ring? Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Allen answered that question. That, my friends, is how you take care of business in a ring when you were wrongly given a loss for that fight against Johnny Fisher. As you're battling down that fight, you hurt Johnny Fisher, you drop him, and then we get into the final seconds of the round. And he lands a devastating left hook to knock Johnny Fisher down, ends up resulting in a KO. Fight is over, end of the 5th round with an electric KO. And I want to put this about Dave Allen. Dave Allen is somebody that I think deserves the credit he's getting right now. He is a beloved fighter, and there's a reason for that. When you talk about Dave Allen, I think he's one of the most genuine fighters out there. He's a guy that is so hard not to root for and not like. Listen, the guy shows up, but he's not always in the best shape. Now, he's a very, very skilled fighter. Don't get that twisted. But in the same breath, Dave Allen obviously is a guy that does not always put his full effort into boxing at all times. He's a guy that's going to come and show back up later on and just be like, okay, I'm ready for another fight, and then go out there and do his work. He hasn't not taken boxing extremely seriously, but that does not change the fact that he's a very skilled fighter. But he's just a guy that people can just get behind and love. And I think Anthony Joshua put this perfectly. Dave was suicidal, a gambling addict who everyone thought was fit a few years ago. Now he's got a family, a few $100,000 to his name, and got his biggest win. That's boxing. That's from Anthony Joshua. I think that perfectly sums up Dave Allen. When you talk about a guy that you can just root for, a guy that you can easily get behind, a guy that goes out there and just proves people wrong, shows up, puts on a great fight, makes the fight always entertaining, whether that be from the build-up process to the actual fight itself, and then who he is outside of the ring is a humble, down-to-earth, fun, lovable type of guy. It's hard not to root for a guy like Dave Allen. And to see him have that monumental of a win on Saturday was huge. I think that's what made that knockout even better. It's because we were looking at a guy that has had the story he's had. And you get that in a lot of sports, sure. But this type of story where you can go out there and redeem yourself the way that Dave Allen did, upsetting a massive up-and-coming prospect in the 5th round after you're wrongly given a loss just a few months ago, and you can right your wrongs in the ring, and you have the story behind your name, and yet you go out there and put an exclamation mark, a monumental, a career highlight reel moment for Dave Allen. Absolutely phenomenal display. And I think we just got to give hats off to Dave Allen for that massive win there. That being said, let's get into what's next for both guys because, as I just said, you're looking at a guy in Dave Allen who now has set himself up for the biggest win of his career, and now he's back on the scene for a little bit. And so my honest answer is there's only one person that he needs to fight next. The winner of David Adelale versus Jamie TKV that's going to be coming up very shortly. That's the fight you need to make. The winner of that fight needs to fight Dave Allen. Perfect. Now let's head over to Johnny Fisher, though. I just talked about the fact that Johnny Fisher was ranked inside the top 15 by the WBA and WBO. He is not a world level fighter, let's just be honest. I love Dave Allen, just give him his praise and props. But Dave Allen is not a guy that's going to go compete on the national worldwide scene. And Johnny Fisher was ranked in that top 15 on 2 of the commissioning bodies, WBA and WBO. A little bit shocking there, to be honest, when you look at it. But the truth of the matter is this. Johnny Fisher was proclaimed to be that next great heavyweight prospect coming out of Britain. Now, obviously, there's a level. Nobody thought he was going to necessarily be Mosey Toma. I know there were some people that thought that would be a 50-50 fight. I never believed that. I think Mosey Toma is far greater than any other prospect in Britain right now. I think he's actually one of the top fighters in all the heavyweight division. But people thought Johnny Fisher was next up. That's why he was ranked in the top 15. That's why he was Matchroom's cash cow of a guy that they were going to continue to push as their next great heavyweight. That's not the case anymore, folks. Many people that studied boxing and saw the way he fought knew that was not Johnny Fisher's future. That doesn't mean that Johnny Fisher is not going to get back to where he was, but he's not going to reach the point that people thought he would reach. Let me clarify that a little bit more for you. Johnny Fisher is going to be a guy that is going to get back to where he was before. What do I mean by that? Fighting at the English level, fighting at guys that are going to be in the area, local fights, guys that will be thrown up on the undercard, guys that are just going to be fun fights, that are entertaining fights, good build-up processes, and have a decent career over the next couple of years, where he's kind of already been at. But what Johnny Fisher is not going to be is the guy that's going to go compete on the worldwide scene. He does not have that in him yet. Now, maybe I'll be proved wrong, but from everything that I have seen up until this point, the future for Johnny Fisher is not going to be that guy. Who he has been throughout his career that's made his name and got him to where he's at today, that's going to be the type of Johnny Fisher we're going to continue to see and witness. But what Johnny Fisher is not going to be is a guy that fights on the worldwide level. He's not a top 15 type of guy, and he's not going to be a guy that's competing for world championships. But he can be in the mix for British level fights, area level fights, and that's what we're going to go see him do. Because you can't deny the fact that he is always a part of entertaining fights. He's quite the character alongside his dad. And when you combine all that together, he's going to be able to sell quite well on the undercard for some decent fights in that area. That's what I've got in store for his future. But major props to Dave Allen once again. Just a sensational fight and performance by Dave Allen. Let's go to the co-main event now. George Ladar versus Aaron Sutton. George Ladar stopped Sutton in the 5th round after dropping him multiple times. Sutton did show some toughness. He was overwhelmed by the power. It was the gap between the two guys in that ring on Saturday were night and day. George Ladar was up here. Aaron Sutton was down here. It is what it is. But let me say this. George Ladar was on the show a little bit over a week ago. And he talked about being the next British flag bearer. And when he said that, I said, okay, I could see that. Definitely could be in the future for him. I think the win that George Ladar just had this weekend proved that he is ready to take the next jump. I think when you talk about prospects, yes, I will place Mosey Toma probably over him because I think Mosey Toma is the number one prospect in all boxing. But when you talk about George the Dart, he's right up there too. And I think he proved that on Saturday. That he legitimately does have a chance to be the next flag bearer for Britain. When you talk about guys in this weight class in the middleweight division, George the Dart has a legitimate chance to make his mark not just on the domestic scene. Now, this might be a couple-year prediction away, but George the Dart has a chance of competing on the worldwide level, on making noise on the worldwide level, and might I even add that he has a chance to become a world champion down the road. Obviously, I'm looking down the road. I'm talking about, multiple years down the road. But the George the Dart that I have seen up until this point, and then the George the Dart that I saw finish off Aaron Sutton in devastating fashion in the 5th round, dropping him multiple times, being in complete control, showed to me and proved that he legitimately has not just a chance at being Britain's next big guy, but being a guy that can fight on the worldwide level and making a lot of noise, maybe even reaching the heights of a world champion. His performance on Saturday was impressive. And what's next for George the Dart? Simple. There's only one fight that George the Dart should even be rumored about being a part of. And it's the fight that came from the winner of the fight right before him. Kieran Conway versus Jerome Warburton. I'll get into that fight momentarily. But George the Dart is ready to fight for the British title. The next fight must be booked. Kieran Conway versus George the Dart for the British middleweight title. It is time to book that fight. There should be no other rumors going on in that fight. I get Brad Pauls. I like Brad Pauls a lot. I think he can fight the winner of that fight then. Right up next needs to be George the Dart versus the winner of who fought in Kieran Conway versus George Warburton. So therefore, Kieran Conway. Conway, Ledard, booked for the British middleweight title. Who do I have winning that fight? Way too early prediction. I have George the Dart. Simple. It's only a matter of time until he's the British middleweight champion. Only a matter of time. He is going to be a star in the making in Britain. Let's head down to the Kieran Conway versus George Warburton fight. I said this was going to be a very lopsided fight. That was correct. Conway stopped Warburton in the 5th round with a vicious body attack. Warburton had a couple good rounds earlier on, but overall, he never was going to beat Kieran Conway. TKO in the 4th round. Fine. Move on from that. It was a fine performance. I think everybody expected that fight to go the way it went, and it's not shocking whatsoever. Here's what I will say, though. When you look at Kieran Conway, his next fight must be the guy I just talked about, George the Dart. He's going to have to defend his belt against George the Dart. I don't think he's going to be able to win that fight, but that's his next job. And I think that's going to be a much better fight because I think when you talk about George the Dart, stepping up against a guy, Kieran Conway, who would be far and away the best fighter he's ever fought. And for Kieran Conway, you could say that's going to be the best fighter he's fought, potentially even. But I think when you talk about that fight, it needs to be made for the British middleweight title. Book that fight next. No reason it does not happen. Then there's a couple of the guys in that fight card that, were not great fights. They're just young prospects. Just want to shout out a little bit. Jimmy Sains, great performance over there. 190 on the scorecard on 191, 98, 92 in favor of Sains. I think he had a great performance overall. Once again, another one of the top rising prospects in the middleweight division. I really like what he brings to the table. Who I could see him fighting, if Brad Pauls gets out of his next fight, A-OK, I could see them making that fight. I think that would be a good fight to make. John Hedges also really was impressive in my opinion. He won on the scorecards 99-92, 98-92, 97-93 in favor of Hedges. He won by unanimous decision. And I think ultimately, once again, simple fight for him, but I think he looked really, really good. He's got to keep an eye on the cruiserweight division. The last prospect I want to get into, Taylor Bevan versus Juan Cruz Cachiro, super middleweight division. Bevan stopped Cachiro in the 2nd round with a relentless pressure. Listen, he's going to be a really good prospect. He is many years out from obviously competing at the high level. But when you talk about the super middleweight division, he's going to be up next. I think he was very impressive. I really like what I saw from him. So there's just 3 guys I have everyone to keep an eye on because I really like what they bring to the table. Let's head over to what happened on the 360 Promotions Fight UFC Fight Pass Vegas Fight Night card with headlined by Sergey Boachuk versus Michael Fox. All right, we're going to go into the co-main event first. I'm going to talk about 2 fights from that card. First up, Omar Trinidad, Alexander Espinoza. Trinidad won by unanimous decision, dominating with speed and combination. Espinoza did show a lot of hustle or a lot of toughness. My apologies on that one. But he was certainly outclassed. And I think that's how everybody expected. Trinidad is the guy that people consider one of the top guys at the featherweight division. He has made his mark. We know he's going to be competing for a world title in the near future. This was not going to be a fight that was going to result in a loss for him, most likely. But Espinoza, big props to him. He obviously showed great toughness. He fought a great fight overall. But the scorecards were pretty much clear. 98-92, 99-91, 190, all in favor of Trinidad. I think he had a great performance. I would have liked to see him go for the KO. I think he held back a little bit there more towards the end of the fight, but excellent performance. Nothing to judge against him. I think it was a great performance. He did his thing out there. What could be next for Trinidad? Well, I've got a lot of things on the table. He's ranked across multiple sanctioning bodies right now, and so things on the table you have Luis Nery, Rui Salim, the winner of Nathaniel Collins versus Lee McGregor happening on Friday. Brandon Figueroa, Elijah Pierce, Luis Alberto Lopez. All of those fights make sense. He's not going to get a world title shot next, but I think he's a fight or two away. Do a title eliminator, a title fight, or a title eliminator, or a fight just to be able to boost yourself up in the rankings. One of those two options to get yourself in position for title eliminator should be what's next for him. He's ready to make the next jump, and I think we saw that flashes on against Alexander Espinoza, and it's clear he is ready to make the next jump. Go fight one of his next top guys and put yourself in position to go for a world title by the end of this year, early 2026. As for the main event, very, very controversial in some ways, and it was a very interesting fight. Serhij Bohachuk versus Michael Fox, junior middleweight division fight. Bohachuk won by unanimous decision, controlling the fight with power shots. But here's what I want to say. I like Serhij Bohachuk. I had Tom Loeffler on the show a couple weeks ago. He talked about the fact that he believes Serhij Bohachuk is the best fighter at 154. I don't agree with that statement. I think that he's a good fighter at 154, not the best. But I do like Serhij Bohachuk. What I will say is the way that he showed up to the fight, 5 pounds overweight, was unacceptable. Honestly, it was embarrassing. That's never okay. That's something that you purposely did. And so that in and of itself was embarrassing. And then we go into the fight, and the fight just was a little bit off. He won by unanimous decision, yes. I think he did win the fight. Overall, I did have him up on my scorecards. But the reason I had him up on my scorecards was because they didn't count the knockdown. And listen, it's very, very controversial. I get the controversy, that's why I'm not going to make a big deal about it. But when you talk about the knockdown in that fight, was it a very powerful punch? Was it maybe a little bit slippage? Sure. But at the end of the day, the punch connected and then he fell. If I were to be honest, I think that Michael Fox should have been credited with the knockdown. If the knockdown was credited for him, he possibly could have won that fight on my scorecards. That's one way to put it. That being said, the scorecards for the judges did read 97-93 on two of them, 98-92 on the other one, in favor of Serhij Bohachuk. I think it was way too wide by the scorecard on the judges. I think the fight was a lot closer than we expected. It was not a great fight by any means, but Serhij Bohachuk versus Michael Fox was a fight that got done. I think Michael Fox controlled his distance quite well. He was staying in a good fighting position overall throughout the entire duration of the fight, and I think he overall controlled the pace better than Serhij Bohachuk did. So yes, I had Bohachuk winning the fight. At the very same time, if you include that knockdown that he should have been credited for, that fight does change sides quickly. Interesting point to make there. Where does this go for each guy next? If you're Serhij Bohachuk, you should push for a fight against Sebastian Fedor or Tim Tszyu. Obviously, they're fighting, so fight the winner of that fight, maybe even the loser of that fight. You could also go for Jesus Ramos, Israel Madrimov, Josh Kelly. And here's the grand finale one that I would like to see happen. Callum Walsh, my apologies. I don't see that fight happening right now. However, it would be easy to have happen. Tom Loeffler, both of the guys are under Tom Loeffler's 360 Promotions brand. You could make that fight happen quite easily. And I think that would be a huge fight for a title eliminator. If I were to book a fight, that's the fight I want to see. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but I would love to see that fight happen. As for Michael Fox, I think he earned some respect that he had a good performance overall. Fighting a guy like Brian Mendoza would be a guy I would like to see him fight. Mendoza's going to work his way back into boxing now. Obviously, Michael Fox get another win under his resume. That would be a good fight to make. Michael Fox had a good performance overall. Nothing against the guy. I think he had a great performance. Could have even won that fight. And I would like to see him back in the ring soon. So that's what I've got in store for the fight preview. Now I'm going to go on a short break, then get into some boxing news updates right after this. See you guys shortly. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, Zach Shoemaker. And with me now is the ring announcer for Queensberry. He's a Riyadh season and the ring boxing events. That's Thomas Treiber. Thomas, appreciate taking time to come on today.
Well, Zach, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, Thomas, you have quite the resume. You have quite the story to get to this point. I know all boxing fans know you. And the reason I wanted to have you on here, too, is because I've had on boxers, I've had on trainers, I've had on coaches, I've had on managers, promoters, but we've yet to have the ring announcer on yet. So you're the very first one. So appreciate you taking time to come on today.
Well, I'm honored.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into this because I said you have quite the story, and I want to get into your story and I want people to get to know who Thomas Treiber is outside of this job that we see every day and how you got to this place. So I want to go all the way back, though. You grew up in Chicago, and you were wrestling and boxing a little bit, announcing on those things. And also, you were training for bodybuilding. So I want to just get to the story. Like, what were you like growing up, and what was it like kind of pursuing this avenue that you now got into?
Well, I grew up just outside the city of Chicago, and I was always interested in sports. When I was around 12, 13, I became a huge professional wrestling fan. So I really started to follow professional wrestling. And then I got interested in bodybuilding also at a young age. I was about 14 years old when I joined a gym and started to get interested in bodybuilding. I eventually competed in bodybuilding as a teenager, which was a great experience. And I think it gave me the opportunity to learn about discipline and so forth. And the ring announcing started when I was 17. I was a senior in high school. A good friend of mine, he was a boxer. His brother was a boxer. And that's where the light bulb went off. And I said, wow, I would like to try ring announcing. And as they say, the rest is history.
Now, we got to go into a couple of those parts right there. First of all, bodybuilding. That had to be something that obviously is not what everybody's part of the story is about. You got into bodybuilding. What was the inspiration behind that? Why'd you find so much joy in that?
You know, I was one of those very thin kids. And,
Okay.
I remember seeing bodybuilding magazines. And then there was a movie called Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lou Ferrigno, Franco Columbo. And it was a movie from the 70s. It was a documentary on, I believe it was the 76 Olympia. And that really sparked my interest in bodybuilding. So joined a local gym with a very good friend of mine. He and I just fell in love with it. And I wanted to see my body change. And thankfully I had genetics for bodybuilding and just took it as far as I could.
Is that something that you also enjoy the working out component? Has that been something you kind of kept in your resume and kind of part of your career going forward now?
Yeah, I mean, I always loved sports. I started playing Little League Baseball when I was 5 years old and played soccer, did track and field and things like that. But once I started high school, bodybuilding was all I wanted to do. So I stopped playing organized sports and just did the bodybuilding. And now at the age of 51, almost 52 next month, I just try to stay fit now. No interest in stepping on a stage. Nobody wants to see me on a stage anymore.
Okay, absolutely. So the other component you said, so you're 17 years old, you start this record of becoming a ring announcer. If I were to talk to young Thomas all the way back there and I said you would become the person that so many people look at the biggest boxing fights every year, and there you are announcing the fight, would that have been something that was shocking to you? Was that just something that was in the back of your mind as a dream? Or is that something that you never would even believed? Or was this exactly how did everything happen exactly as you had planned?
I had no visions of becoming a ring announcer on an international scale. For me, it was just, I was interested in broadcasting. When I was finishing high school, I was looking into colleges and I saw broadcasting, radio, maybe news. I wasn't even quite sure what I wanted to do behind a microphone. But as I mentioned, when I saw my friend who was a boxer, it just clicked. I said, wow, that's something I would like to try and do. And being that I was a big pro wrestling fan, I was already familiar with a few ring announcers, especially Howard Finkel, who was the voice of the World Wrestling Federation for many years. So I pretty much just went in there and tried to impersonate Howard Finkel, from watching wrestling all those years. But I never could have imagined it would have turned into a career. And it certainly didn't happen overnight either.
When did it start to click for you? You said, you know what, I feel like this could be something that I could actually have a very successful career in. When did that happen?
Well, I started in 1991 when I was
Hmm.
17 years old. And then in 92, 93, I became a professional wrestler
Right.
because of my connections in the wrestling business as a ring announcer and because of my bodybuilding background. That opportunity was there for me to train and actually become a professional
Hmm.
wrestler. So for a couple of years, I really put most of my attention to the wrestling, but I never stopped ring announcing. I still kept doing events locally and things like that. But in regards to ring announcing and knowing that this could be a career, it was in the mid 90s that I got my first gig on national television on ESPN The Deuce. And
Hmm.
that's when ESPN was expanding and they created ESPN The Deuce, which then became ESPN2.
Okay.
And that gave me a platform to ring announce on national television. And that's where I really started to focus 100% on the ring announcing and moved away from the wrestling end.
So at that point in time, then, would you have expected that you would become one of the biggest faces of all ring announcers at that point, or is that so shocking to you at that point?
Well, I'm still waiting for that to happen, Zach. I appreciate that. No, look, I mean, I'm very thankful for the opportunities I'm getting. I've never imagined that I would be working in Saudi Arabia on a regular
Right.
basis, the UK on a monthly basis. So it's really an honor. I always say this as a ring announcer, Zach, there's no bigger honor than to be flown to another country to ring
Mhm.
announce because there are plenty of very good qualified ring announcers in the UK. So I never take that for granted, but I really gave it 100%. One thing about me is when I do something, I want to give it my all.
Love it.
So I just wanted to take the ring announcing as far as I could. And now to be working side by side with Michael Buffer on all the
Mhm.
Riyadh season events and now the ring events as well, it is truly an honor and dream come true.
You said that you're not even at the level you maybe could be at one day. Like, what do you see yourself in the future now? Obviously, you're still going to do this for many, many, many more years if you so choose to. What levels do you see yourself possibly reaching?
Well, I mean, I just want to continue. You know, you never stop learning, you never stop improving. And I
Mm,
just want to keep doing it and see where it goes.
right.
Like I said, I'm very fortunate to be in the position I am in right now. I've been part of many great events, especially over the last, I've been with Queensberry for almost 8 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, but we started with uh, the shows with Saudi Arabia about a year and a half ago, about 18 months ago. And that has just taken things to another level with
Hmm.
the events that I've been part of. Big productions, big undisputed world title events, and things like that. So I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I try my best every opportunity I get and just see what the future holds.
You said something crazy that you said that you're going to keep on learning. I think that's obviously a part of life right there. But people will look at you and say, "I think you're doing pretty good out there. You obviously have made yourself very successful. You sound great." But you say you continue to learn at each step. How do you learn? Like, what's, for example, let's say over the past 4 or 5 months, what are some things you've learned and improved on?
Well, as a ring announcer, there's so many different elements to it.
Okay.
You want to do your best to memorize your lines. You want to
Sure.
have, smooth delivery. You want to add excitement to the introductions. But when you add that excitement, the key is that people can understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
I've seen some ring announcers make the mistake where they use their voice in a very strong way, but it gets to a point to where you can't really understand what they're saying. So I think the magic of ring announcing is to bring excitement, but for it to be your voice at just
Mm.
another level to add excitement. But everybody can understand everything you're saying and things like that. But um, I'm just always trying to, I'll watch some of my work and think, you know what, I could have done that a little bit better, or maybe I'll
Mm.
add a word here or a word there. So just making little tweaks here and there, just trying to always do better.
Your voice has become a voice that people recognize in all the boxing world now. How about that voice though? Because obviously, to become a ring announcer, you have to have a signature voice, a signature style. When did you start to really deliver and kind of figure out, okay, this is my style, this is the way I'm going to do it? Like your branding, I think is probably the proper word for that. When did that start to come to fruition for yourself?
Well, that's a good question, Zach. I mean, when you become a ring announcer, it takes time. And
Right.
whenever I have other ring announcers, especially aspiring ring announcers, reach out to me, I always tell them, do as many shows as you can. And because getting comfortable inside the ring is so important, especially when you start working at a high level where you have a worldwide audience or you're on live on television. You want to feel as comfortable and confident as you possibly can. But I think the key thing to focus on is good pronunciation, whether a fighter is from Chicago or they're from China. You want to
Right.
say their name, their hometown, their country as close to the natives of that country pronounce it. So you do your homework. I try and talk with each fighter at every event to make sure I get the pronunciation of exactly how they want me to say their name, hometown, nickname, whatever it may be. But use your own voice. I think it's very important to use your own voice and not try to impersonate anyone. You never want to go in there and sound like you're trying to be Michael Buffer or Jimmy Lennon Jr. And so I think it's important to try and hone your own style and use your own voice.
I have to ask though, before you've ever gone into a fight, do you ever get nervous? Is there ever nerves that come with it, or how do you deal with that?
You see that? This is my TV hand.
Okay.
No, I mean, of course, we all can feel nervous at times, but I think the key thing is, like I said, experience makes you more comfortable. I think with any job, the longer you do a job, the more confident you're going to become, the more comfortable you're going to become. But certainly when you do a big event like when we did Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois at Wembley Stadium this past summer, we had over 90,000 fans. And even though I didn't do the main event that night, I did the co-main when there was already over 90,000 people in the stadium and a worldwide audience.
Yeah.
And you really just block it out. I mean, I'm so focused on what I'm doing. I try to block it out. Even a few weeks ago, we were in London at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. We did the Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn event where we had close to 70,000 fans there at that stadium. And, but I feed off that. I call it more adrenaline and excitement rather than nerves. I think you feed off the crowd sometimes and it shows in your performance. So I try to use a big audience, to my advantage.
I know you said you always want to learn. You make improvements over your career. If you were to go back and you were to say there's one time that you remember at the back of your mind that really stands out to you that you messed up on, that you feel like if you could get one moment back, you'd want to redo that moment. What is that moment for you?
That would be being on your show, Zach.
All right.
That would be the one. No, actually, I made my mistakes. And unfortunately, I made a mistake on national television. On ESPN, I mentioned that I got my first break on national TV with ESPN The Deuce. Well, I was only on my second show, and we were in Johnson City, Tennessee, and I made a rookie mistake. I left my note card ringside. The fight stopped. It was a stoppage, TKO. I go inside the ring. I've got my microphone. I go over to get the time from the timekeeper, and it's at that moment that I'm realizing, wait a minute, I don't have my card with me. And as I turn around, the floor director's pointing at me, go, go, go. And I felt the pressure because we're on live television. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to wing it without my card. So as I'm saying, the official time, 2 minutes, 25 seconds of round number 2, your winner by technical knockout. And I'm realizing I don't know the fighter's name. I mean, I'm literally, and just as I was saying, your winner by technical knockout, I said, what's your name to the fighter because he was right next to me. But I made a mistake. The microphone was still by my mouth. So everybody heard me say, what's your name? And I mean, the crowd bursted into laughter. This thing went viral before things went viral. It ended up on a newscast. I don't know if you're pretty young. I don't know if you remember the David Letterman show.
I do remember that, yep.
It ended up on David Letterman. They showed it as a blooper. I thought my career was over, Zach. I thought that was it. I was going to retire from ring announcing and get a job at an oil refinery. But no, I got a call from the promoter maybe a week or two after, he said, look, you're going to do the next show, brush it off, forget about it. Let's focus on the next event. That's what I did. It was the best advice I ever got. And thankfully, here I am 30 years later, still doing this.
I think that's a huge testament to just life in general, because you're going to make mistakes, you're going to mess up, and things are going to happen. And as you said, at that point, I'm sure it's embarrassing. I'm sure at that point you said you didn't know if your career was going to be over at that moment. But yet, obviously, that's not the story for yourself. So when you talk about that, just being able to learn from that opportunity, obviously still having a promoter had grace and being saying, okay, you know what, you're going to be all right, we'll let you come back again. But when you talk about learning from that, not just getting too down on yourself long term, I'm sure at the moment, but how did you just bounce back from that confidence-wise going forward then?
It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy.
Right.
It added to my nerves. I was very nervous. I was frightened of making another mistake. But I think that helped me because you learn from your mistakes. And I will tell you, I never forgot my card ringside ever again. I when I got in that ring, I was squeezing that no card. So the key in life, we're all humans. We're all going to make mistakes. But the key is to learn from your mistake and try and become better.
Absolutely. Well, I want to go back into your story a little bit more, because I know we kind of got talking to a little bit moving forward now, but you also were a part of wrestling, as you just talked about. And I got to ask you more about that, because you're wrestling against stars like Steve Austin, Rick Rude, Brian Pillman. That had to be quite a sensational part of your life too. So break down that part of your life a little bit.
Well, as I said, I started ring announcing at 17. And when I started ring announcing, I was ring announcing both boxing and professional wrestling. And as I mentioned, when we started the show, I was a huge pro wrestling fan. So obviously for me, it was always, a dream to maybe even try wrestling at some point. And the timing and the opportunity was there right after I competed in a bodybuilding competition at 19. I had the opportunity to train, become a professional wrestler, wrestled mostly on the independent wrestling circuit, which are small events and mostly throughout the Chicago area. But I got very lucky. There was a World Championship Wrestling WCW talent scout at one of the shows I wrestled on. It was in St. Louis, Missouri. And he said, look, we like your look. We'd like to bring you and put you on television. And at the time, WCW, World Championship Wrestling, they were the number 2 company under the WWF, which is now the WWE. So this is a pretty big deal for a 19-year-old kid to go wrestle on national television with WCW. And I had wonderful opportunities. I wrestled Stone Cold Steve Austin, who at the time was stunning Steve Austin, Flying Brian Pillman, ravishing Rick Rude, who was a huge professional wrestling star, a tag team called the Awesome Kongs, a guy named the Equalizer. So I had an opportunity to wrestle at a level I never thought I would get a chance to wrestle at. And it happened so fast for me. But deep down, I always knew the announcing was my first love. And that's what I really, really wanted to pursue. So after a couple of years of wrestling, and by the way, I was enhancement talent. I was a jobber. I was a guy that they would bring in. This is for WCW. I was the guy they would bring in to lose. I was never the guy winning the match. I was always the guy losing the match. And I wasn't under contract, but they were using me and putting me on television. And as a 19-year-old kid who was a huge pro wrestling fan, it was truly a dream come true. But it was in 94 that I decided that's it. I want to go 100% with the ring announcing, and haven't looked back since.
If I were to ask you your favorite memory and your worst memory from wrestling, what would those answers be?
Well, probably my worst memory would be I was wrestling a guy named the Equalizer. And he did what's called a choke slam. And that's where you lift a guy up by his throat, straight up off his feet, and then you drop him flat on his back. Well, in this situation, I jumped up for him as you're supposed to. You're supposed to jump up for your opponent because they're not going to really lift you by your neck. Yeah. So I jumped up for him, and what he did, he shoved me. He shoved me mid-air, and instead of landing flat on my back, I landed on the back of my head. And, I strained my neck, but I wasn't seriously injured. I was actually back wrestling a week later. But it was a scary moment. It was a scary moment. That is on the internet. Someone posted it not too long ago, and it's pretty gruesome. the way I landed on the back of my head because it was on television, and this is with WCW.
Okay.
So it's out there. It's out there. And but thankfully, I was not seriously injured because, professional wrestling, although it is choreographed, guys really do get hurt. You're not in there to hurt your opponent, but accidents happen. And in this case, thankfully, I wasn't seriously injured. And he, and the guy who did it, he apologized, and it was a mistake. I don't blame him. No hard feelings or anything like that. But things like that happen. So thankfully, I didn't break my neck, and I was able to, like I said, a week later.
Awesome. And then the other side of that, what would be your best story you've ever had from your wrestling career?
Oh, wow. One of the things I loved about wrestling, being in the wrestling business, was the camaraderie that you have with the other wrestlers.
Okay.
You spend a lot of time in the cars together, traveling from event to event and things like that. You go to the gym together. You're in the locker room together, and a lot of the guys rib each other, make fun of each other. It's just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and I think one of the things I cherished the most from being a professional wrestler when I was the camaraderie that I had with other wrestlers. It was just a lot of fun.
I think you talked about something kind of unique there, and that's the fact that obviously you were going to this point, and you said always back in the back of your mind, your heart, you knew that your career was to be ring announcing. And so I have to ask you that if you were to go directly to that moment, can you pinpoint the moment that you decide, you know what, thing's not for me, I'm going to move on from this, and I want to go pursue ring announcing? What was that moment, and what led to that decision?
I don't think it was something that actually happened in one day or one moment. I think it was just kind of over the course of time. I was losing interest in wrestling, and my opportunities with the ring announcing were getting bigger and bigger. And I kind of started to, gravitate away from wrestling. But certainly when I started ring announcing national TV, and I had the opportunity to start working events on ESPN, that's where I really lost all interest in pursuing the professional wrestling anymore.
And as you go through this journey, I mean, you work for different people, Top Rank, ESPN, Fox Sports Net, Network, USA Network, HBO. Like, this is a long list of climbing your way all the way to the point where you're at today. And I feel like it's been a long journey, as you said. It's been a lot of ups and downs, bumps, roads, whatever it's been to get to where you're at today. When you look back throughout your journey, outside of that one blooper moment you had, was there a moment that you kind of looked at and said, okay, this maybe isn't going as planned. I'm not where I want to be yet. Was there ever tough moments like that throughout your career?
Absolutely. There was, I've been in this business for a little over 3 decades, and there's been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of peaks and valleys, as they say. And there were certainly some lean years where the phone wasn't ringing like I wanted it to ring, and started to think about maybe getting another job or moving into another career path. But when you really love something, it's really, really hard to walk away from it. And the passion never ended for me. I was always very passionate about it. And I think that's what got me through the lean years and the tough times. But certainly whenever you're involved in anything with television, there's a lot of things out of your control. You might end up on a boxing series, but the network decides to pull the plug on it. So it's not always about your performance. There's a lot of things sometimes that are out of your control. So the best advice I ever give anyone is just do the very best job you can with every opportunity you get, and just let the cards fall where they do.
What would you say was the toughest time span? Like, you said there were some dry years or whatever. What was the moment you pinpoint back looking at it and say, you know what, that was tough. It's kind of crazy that I got through that point.
Well, in the late 90s, I ended up on a series with Fox Sports Net, and that was from 97 to around 2000. And when that series ended for me, I was a bit lost, because at that time, if you weren't on HBO or you weren't on Showtime, there wasn't a lot in between.
Right.
So here I had this wonderful run where I was under contract with Fox Sports Net and a company called America Presents. And I was working 2-3 shows a month on national TV, 2-3 times a month. And then it just comes to a screeching halt. And as a ring announcer, I was certainly able to get work with smaller events and things like that. But the money did not compare to what I was making with the Fox series, and the exposure didn't compare to the exposure of being on national TV. So I had about a year or two where I really was trying to figure things out. I had also just turned 30 years old, and I was just trying to find myself. So I explored some different career avenues, but never quit ring announcing. And thankfully, the phone started to ring again, and I ended up working events on national TV again on a regular basis. So I'm just glad I stuck with it, and I'm glad that the phone kept ringing.
For those that aren't familiar with the business side of being a ring announcer, like you keep talking about the phone ringing. Is that something that kind of works? Kind of break us down for us. I know some people know, athletes, they have contracts, they have this many fights, whatever it might be. When you're talking about the business side of ring announcing for yourself, is this something where you outline a couple months out? Is this a couple weeks out before, and you just have, okay, you're gonna ring announce for this fight? How does that whole process work?
Well, I mean, as a ring announcer, you're typically hired by promoters.
Okay.
And so the promoters are your clients. So obviously, the more promoters you work for, the more events you're going to do. Or maybe you have a client like right now, for the past 8 years, I've been with Queensberry out of England, Frank Warren, Hall of Fame promoter. And they have a contract now with DAZN. So all of our shows air on DAZN. Just before we did this deal that started April 1st, we were on a network called TNT Sports. And right before it was TNT, it was BT Sport. So I'm in a good position where I work for a company that does a lot of shows. So they're my number one client. So no matter who calls me, if I'm booked with Queensberry, that's it. That's who I'm working for on that date. But I try to stay as busy as possible. There are some other great promoters throughout the world that I work for that keep me busy when I'm not doing a Queensberry event. And then also now with the Riyadh season events that we've been doing in Saudi Arabia, that has been a great addition to my schedule. But during those lean years or waiting for the phone to ring, that would have been a period of time in my career where I didn't have that client who was using me for 20, 30, 40 shows a year. So you're just hoping that phone rings so you could, work as many weekends out of the month as you can.
Traveling has to be a little bit chaotic. I'm sure you also love it at the same time because just following, we've followed each other on LinkedIn for a little while now. You're always, you're going to Saudi Arabia one week and you're going to the UK the next week and you're going all over the world and you're living obviously out in the United States. That's a lot of traveling hours you rack up. How do you adjust to the traveling lifestyle?
It is a lifestyle that you have to adjust to, and it's something you have to enjoy. If you don't like traveling, well, ring announcing would probably not be the career for you. So I've always loved traveling. I've always loved performing, and getting an opportunity to travel has been a big plus. I've been to places I never thought that I would ever go or visit. Like I mentioned earlier, Saudi Arabia. I never thought I'd be in the country of Saudi Arabia, let alone wearing a tuxedo, holding a microphone inside of a boxing ring. So, but it can be challenging, certainly on family life or, your sleep schedule. I've been home now for about a week. I actually just got back from a 28-day international trip. It was in Saudi Arabia for 1 week for the WBC Grand Prix. Then I went to London for the Conor Benn versus Eubank Jr. event. Then I went back to Saudi Arabia for the Canelo Alvarez Williams School fight week. Then I went back to England for a DAZN show that we just had with Anthony Kakachi. And it was, a crazy 28 days. So I've been home for about a week now, just trying to catch up on my sleep. The time zone difference is difficult from where I live. Saudi Arabia is 9 hours ahead of Texas. England is 6 hours ahead. So it's just something you learn to deal with, and it could definitely be challenging.
I think balance is always a huge part. Like you said, this time you've had a little bit over a week now to recoup. I know we talked before you're going to head to Scotland now in a couple of days, but is that something when you map out your timeline, it's kind of like, okay, I need to make sure I give myself at least a week here or there to make sure I can recover and stay healthy, keep a good balance?
Absolutely. I look at my schedule and I think, wow, I've got 3 days off there. I could get my tux and clothes over to the cleaners. I can, get what I need for the next trip, try and catch up on my sleep, things like that. So I definitely look when I did a show this past Saturday, but it was in San Antonio, Texas. So I
Okay.
didn't need to get on an airplane. I didn't need to stay at a hotel,
Right.
which was nice to squeeze in a show like that in between, events out in the UK. But yeah, you definitely just do your best to make the most out of your time when you're home.
I also want to get back into your journey because you talk about just, I think one of the biggest things you had in 2008 was a card featuring both Carl Franch and Tyson Fury's pro debut. Walk us through that, because that was obviously had to be a big experience for yourself going to Nottingham, England. What was that like?
Well, that was my first ever event in the UK, in
Oh,
England.
wow.
I'll never forget, I was still in the Chicago area, got a phone call midweek, and they said, "Can you be on a plane tomorrow to England?" And I was like, holy cow, I had never thought that I would ever work in England, let alone be getting on a plane within 24 hours.
Right.
And that will always be a great memory for me. The event was in Nottingham, England. The venue at the time was called the Trent FM Arena. The main event was Carl Froch, the Cobra he's known as. He had a great career. He was fighting Jean Pascal, and they were fighting for the vacant WBC super middleweight world title. Carl won the fight. It was his first world title. He was from Nottingham, so the crowd went absolutely berserk. That was the first time I realized, Zach, wow, the fans here in the UK are very special. They show a lot of enthusiasm. You see it with the soccer games, or football as they call it there. And they always get mad when I call it soccer. But they really embrace sports, and they really embrace boxing. And also on that card, and by the way, that was December of 2008, a fighter by the name of Tyson Fury made his pro debut in our opening TV fight. So Fury's pro debut, Carl Froch's first world title fight. What a magical night it was.
I think you said something unique there. And I think when you look at the fan bases in the UK, I think Japan's right up there as well. They have an incredible fan base. I think Mexico too. Like our countries obviously value boxing probably a little bit more than US does. I know we're much more of a legitimate football country. I think basketball probably up in front of boxing as well. But when you talk about that, is there a noticeable difference in the atmosphere when you go announce in the UK as opposed to America?
Absolutely. And look, I mean, there are great boxing fans here in the United States. But in the UK, they really show their enthusiasm, their love for the sport. And for example, if a fighter is a British champion, not even a world champion, they still get treated like they're a world champion. The fans still embrace them like they're a world champion. And that's no disrespect to being a British champion. It's a very respectable title for any fighter from Great Britain. But you can really feel the difference. And I just love working shows there. As a ring announcer, again, like I said earlier, sometimes you feed off the energy of the crowd, and it just makes it that much more exciting for me as a ring announcer.
I also want to ask about the Queensberry deal, because as you talk about, that's your number one client now. We see you always on the Queensberry cards. How did that relationship come to be with Frank Warren?
Well, it was in September of 2017 that I was contacted by Queensberry. They had just started a series with BT Sport. That was the network that they had a TV deal with at the time. And they really wanted to have one ring announcer to be the face of Queensberry and the face of this new series. And I had a few relationships with people involved with Queensberry, and thankfully my name was brought up, and they contacted me, and we worked out a deal. And it's been a wonderful 8 years, from doing shows at arenas to stadiums, now working in Saudi Arabia. And they're a great company to work for. Frank Warren, of course, a Hall of Fame promoter and a great person, more importantly.
We've also talked a lot about Riyadh's season. Obviously, it's become one of the biggest, most talking points that you had in boxing now, and you're a part of that now. I think that's what, like you said, it's really helped take your game to the next level, your brand, and those things. How did that come to be?
Well, because Queensberry had Tyson Fury, and Saudi Arabia wanted to have Tyson Fury fight in Saudi Arabia. So the first event we did was Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou,
Right.
the former UFC heavyweight champion. And because they wanted Fury and he was with Queensberry and also Bob Arum's Top Rank, they had they both promoted Tyson Fury. But Frank got the deal to stage this event with Saudi Arabia and do the event in Riyadh. And thankfully, because of my relationship with Queensberry, it opened that door of opportunity for me to work that event. They did bring in Michael Buffer to do the main event, but I got to host the grand arrivals, the media workouts, the press conference, all fight week buildup, and do the full undercard, even the co-main event. So it's a little more than just being an undercard ring announcer, even though you're not doing the main event. So that's what opened that window of opportunity for me. And as we've done more and more events in Saudi Arabia, we've also done events in Los Angeles and in London with Saudi Arabia. They wanted to keep the continuity of me and Michael because they just don't want to be flip-flopping ring announcers. So thankfully, they've been happy with my work, and they've wanted to keep it me and Michael Buffer representing the Riyadh season brand, if you will.
They do things a lot different. I know you obviously see things like, the open workouts are pretty much for any fight week and stuff like that, press conferences, but theirs is really taking another level. I mean, we talk about what they did in LA, talk about what they do in London. Like, they do different massive venues. It's a big TV production around each and every single event that they build up to the fight. When you talk about being able to be a part of that, how unique is it and how special is it being a part of Riyadh season or even now, obviously, the ring cards?
It's absolutely incredible. I mean, the productions are top notch.
Yeah.
From the stages to the sound systems, everything with these Riyadh season events and the ring events are just done at the highest level. So as a ring announcer, to get to be part of these big time productions, it's really a dream come true. And just look forward every time we finish one of them. I just can't wait until the next one.
You've also talked about Michael Buffer, obviously an all-time great, a legend of the sport. When you talk about just getting to be able to learn from him and take things from him, I'm sure you've asked him so many questions, just being able to soak in information and wisdom from him. How big of an influence has he now had on your life?
Oh, big time. I've known Michael for over 20 years.
Okay.
But it used to be where when I would do undercards for HBO, I would do maybe the first 2 fights and they'd just be 4-round fights. And he would come in and do, the 4 fights or whatever live on HBO. So we had minimal interaction ringside. And he's always been very kind to me, always been a gentleman to me. But working these events in Saudi Arabia, we've spent a lot more quality time with each other because you have to be there for a full week. So it's given me the opportunity to get to know Michael on a more personal level, and to be working with him on these events has been a very valuable experience. And he's just a great guy, one of the funniest people you'll ever meet in your life as well. People would probably be surprised at how hilarious he is. I mean, he could have been a stand-up comedian. So
really?
He's hilarious. So we really, it's been a lot of fun to not only learn, but have a lot of fun with the best to ever do it. I mean, come on, who doesn't know who Michael Buffer is?
Right. Yep. What would you say has been the biggest lesson that you've learned from him?
Wow, that's a good question. There's been a lot of little things that he's pointed out to me that, make a big difference. I'll tell you one thing is in regards to performing. He'll be backstage watching me do the undercards because usually in his dressing room, they'll have a TV inside there. And he had noticed that I was holding the mic a bit high. And when you hold the mic high, you're covering a good part of your face.
Okay.
And I remember he had texted me while we were doing the pay-per-view, lower the mic, and that's a habit that I created because when you book events with a sound system, it's not a great sound system. And you would know this, Zach, as a man who works behind a microphone. You have a tendency to want to really put that mic close to your mouth because you feel like you have to have it really close to your mouth. when you're working with these incredible sound systems, you really don't have to put that mic right to your mouth. You can just put it
Gotcha.
right under your chin, and you're going to get this beautiful sound quality. So it was just a bad habit that I had, you know, started doing throughout the years, and
Mhm.
I lowered the mic, and that was something that I'll forever will never forget. That Michael Buffer is the one that told me I need to hold that mic lower, put it under your chin, don't cover your face. So little things like that.
You also said that he's one of the funniest people you've ever been around, which I think is a little bit surprising to people that hear that. So I have to ask you then, what's the funniest story you have with Michael Buffer?
Oh man, he does a lot of impersonations. He does a lot of different voices and things like that. So we seem to have a lot of same humor, if you will.
Okay.
He's a real jokester. Just a few weeks, the last show when we did the Canelo event, we both used the same pen. We both,
Okay.
it's a really good pen to use for our cards. So he
Okay.
was the one that recommended I buy these pens on Amazon. And when we were doing the Canelo event, I had already been on the road for like 2.5, 3 weeks. And the pen I had was running out of ink. And I knew he had a few of them, because we use the same pen. So I asked him, I say, Michael, can I borrow one of your pens? Mine's running out of ink and I want to continue using it. So he said, well, meet me in the hallway, by the elevator. So I went up, and as soon as I stepped out of the elevator at the hallway, he had the pen and he was acting like it was stuck in his neck. And he was going, then he pulled it out and gave me the pen. I was like, who would think Michael Buffer would be pretending that there was a pen stuck in his neck?
That's hilarious.
And so I just little things like that are just, he could be, quite a jokester, man.
I love it. Well, Thomas, I've got one of the final things I want to wrap up with you is 10 rapid fire questions. Now, some of them I might on the very end follow up with you, but for now, I'm just going to give quick answers for each one of these. It's going to be 10 quick questions for you. So let's get right to it. The first one, what is the favorite fight you've ever been the ring announcer for?
Who? I'd have to go back to Nottingham. Carl Fry versus John Pascal. My first show in the UK, England.
Your favorite venue to ring announce in?
Wembley Stadium.
The dream venue to ring announce that you have not been at yet?
Madison Square Garden, New York. I've worked Madison Square Garden Theater,
Okay.
but I have not worked in the arena.
The best city that you've ever been to for ring announcing?
Oh, my goodness. I'm going to go with London. Like I said, the UK fans are spectacular.
The greatest of all time ring announcer?
Michael Buffer. Come on, hands down. And look, Jimmy Lennon Jr., and if you go the wrestling end, Howard Finkel, these guys are all legends as well.
The best atmosphere you've ever been to ring announce at?
Well, over 90,000 fans at Wembley Stadium for Anthony Joshua versus Dubois. That's a moment I'll never forget.
If you could pick one fight that you could put together that you could ring announce for, what would it be?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Oh, good. If you could pick one fight, a dream fight to make up for yourself right now that you could go ring announce for, what would it be?
Oh, my goodness. I would say Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua.
All right. Your favorite fighter to announce for?
Right now, currently, my favorite fighter, I'll tell you right now, he's the featherweight world champion, Nick the Wrecking Ball. Just love that kid, love his style, and I love saying his name inside the ring.
Your favorite card that you ever announced for, top to bottom?
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but that Wembley Stadium show for me with over 90,000 fans was just truly something extra special.
And the 10th one, the most shocking scorecard you've ever read?
Oh, my goodness. Wow. There's been quite a few. Oh, gosh. Let's see. You put me on the spot here, Zach. I'm trying to think right now what would be. There was one not too long ago. Oh man, I can't pinpoint exactly one right now. There's been quite a few that have really shocked me.
Absolutely. Well, I want to follow up on a couple of those. One of which is you said the favorite fighter to announce for is Nick Ball. And I think that's something unique. I think we've seen a couple different ring announcers talk about the fact that, you have certain interactions with certain athletes, certain fighters. When you talk about that, I think you kind of a little bit hinted at that with Nick Ball. When you talk about just being able to kind of grow a relationship with these fighters, talking to them, announcing for them, what is that bond like?
It's great. These fighters, first of all, they're putting their lives on the line. Right. I know sometimes they get paid a lot of money, but boy, I mean, it's a tough sport. It's a tough sport. So whenever I get an opportunity to get to know a fighter a little bit on a personal level, it makes it a lot more fun and exciting when you get to see them, watch them box. Right. So I've met there are a lot of great people in boxing.
The other one is that one you did not give that answer for, but the most shocking scorecard. You said there's been quite a few before. Nobody knows the sport of boxing. Controversy is just a part of the thing. It goes hand in hand with boxing. When you talk about that aspect of it, and you get up there and you see a scorecard that you're pretty sure you know who won the fight, and then you read the scorecard and it's not quite the thing that you thought was going to happen, what goes through your mind?
I never want to see a fighter get robbed. I think that's the worst thing is when a fighter clearly won a fight and they don't get the decision. I hate to see that. So, but at the same time, it can be a little bit fun being the bearer of bad news or the one that's going to break the news to all the fans because you're going to shock everyone. So it's kind of fun to be the messenger of a shocking decision as well. But again, I never want to see a fighter lose when he should have won a fight.
Has there ever been a situation where you've been in the ring and there's obviously a situation like that where obviously a controversial outcome, to say the least, happens? And I know we've seen sometimes where the corners get a little bit heated about stuff happening. I know we saw one just a little bit ago, the TKV one got a little bit heated in there. But when you talk about those situations, has there ever been a weird, awkward situation after you've announced a scorecard in the ring?
Oh, absolutely. I've had a fighter, this is many, many years ago. He spit on my shoe. He got very mad. He was mad that I announced the other guy as the winner. And he actually spit on my tuxedo shoes.
Really?
That kind of stuff doesn't happen, very often. Sure. But I've had fans screaming and yelling at me when I step outside the ring. And I'm like, look, don't kill the messenger. I'm not one of the judges. I'm just the ring announcer. But they always, sometimes they want to take out their frustrations on the guy who announced the decision. So I've been in those situations a few times.
Absolutely. Well, Thomas, I've got one final question for you. It's the question I like wrapping up every single interview with, and it's talking about your legacy. Obviously, you still have potentially a lot more years on the table being a ring announcer.
Hope so.
Absolutely. But when you do decide to step away from being a ring announcer and move on from life in this aspect, what is it that you want to accomplish? What is it that you want to be remembered for what you've accomplished in your career?
Wow. Okay, man. Another tough question here, Zach. Well, first of all, I hope to ring announce until the wheels fall off. Okay. Working with Michael Buffer, he turned 80 in November, and he's still going strong. He still looks amazing. He's still doing a great job in there. And I would like to just continue doing it as long as I can. And if I want to be remembered for anything, I just want to be remembered for a guy who was truly passionate about his job and did the best he could every event, whether there was 50 people out there or whether it was 95,000 people at a stadium. That guy gave it everything he had every time he had the opportunity with a microphone in his hand.
I love that. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for taking time to come on today. It's been a blessing and honor having you on here.
Well, thank you, Zach. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor, and best of luck to you with all your endeavors.
Appreciate that. Likewise with you. You're always welcome on as well, Thomas. Appreciate you again.
Thank you.
I appreciate everyone for tuning into the interview. I'll have that edited out and clipped up, posted on my YouTube channel very shortly. I'll go on a quick break and wrap the show very shortly. See you guys soon. Welcome back, everyone, to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, Zach SchuZ Shoemaker. I hope you guys are having a great Monday so far. I'm going to wrap up the show with some boxing news that we're going to get into. First and foremost, Floyd Schofield versus Treiber is in the works for June 28th on the Jake Paul versus Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. undercard. I'm going to say this time and time again. The Jake Paul situation is always going to be a debatable topic. Is his fights ever that good? No. Is he ever a superstar boxer? No. But here's what I do appreciate about him. They do put on good undercards. And the way that this undercard is starting to come together with Zerto, with Tevin Farmer, Floyd Schofield, etc., it's starting to look like a very good card. And I love seeing that. Now, some more details on why it's going to be Tevin Farmer as opposed to Lucas Body is because it ended with money issues for the Lucas Body situation. But I think we got an upgrade, to be honest. I know Lucas Body obviously has had a great career, but I love the way Tevin Farmer fights. Remember, we have to remember this. He debatably, if not did beat Williams Zepeda in the first fight. The second fight, he was fighting with one arm, and he still looked decent. I think Tevin Farmer is a very underrated fighter right now. I don't think he gets the proper credit he deserves. And so I think Floyd Schofield versus Farmer is a perfect fight for both guys moving forward. Oscar Duarte has re-signed Golden Boy Promotions and is expected to return to the ring on August 2nd in Chicago, Illinois versus Kenneth Sims. Great fight. Great matchmaking. I love that fight. I think it's going to be a great venue, great situation. Great fight. Just want to announce that. Turki Al-Sheikh has confirmed with my apologies. Let me try that again. Turki Al-Sheikh has confirmed that the promoter for Canelo Alvarez or Terrence Bud Crawford will be Sela for Riyadh season on September 13th, with the broadcaster still yet to be decided. Al-Sheikh previously said that Dana White thought TKO would promote the fight, but the date changed, meaning a clash with Noche UFC 3 that no longer appears to be the case. Very interesting news right there. Here's what I'm going to say about that statement. When we look at this situation, everyone was excited because it's supposed to be Dana White promotion of the very big card of Canelo Alvarez and Bud Crawford to be the biggest card of the year. We knew that there was going to be a clash with timelines. And already it was going to be challenged with it being Friday and Saturday. But with Turki Al-Sheikh obviously wanted this fight to go down on a Saturday, there's going to be problems there. And so now it does bring a question, though, as to what is Dana White's role going to be in boxing? Is that still on the table? I have to imagine that it certainly will be on the table. But not getting the biggest fight of the year is going to be a little bit detrimental to him. This was going to be his big break into boxing. And what a bigger way to break into boxing than Canelo Alvarez versus Bud Crawford. If that's now off the table, that means what is on the table for him? I'm sure Turki will figure something out for him if that is so what they're going to pursue. But listen, it's going to be a very, very difficult challenge for Dana White. If Dana White wants to go all in on boxing, he's not going to be able to be the same guy he is with the UFC. And there's a handful of UFC problems they got to figure out right now as well. Because when you talk about the UFC, you got big problems in regards to John Jones and the Tom Aspinall situation. You got a lot of guys that don't want to fight in big fights. Islam not doing the fight with Ilia Topuria, so on and so forth. The UFC is enough work in and of itself for Dana White to handle. That if he's going to want to balance both of them, it's going to be very difficult. Now, I do personally believe that the UFC is in good hands when Dana White does leave eventually. I think Hunter Campbell and that staff is incredible. But if Dana White's serious about boxing, managing both of them is going to be very difficult. It's feasible, it's possible, but difficult. And we saw it right here as a prime example. The biggest card you could possibly get this entire year, Bud Crawford and Canelo Alvarez fighting each other. And you're not going to be able to do that because of the fact that you have UFC Noche. Not very feasible to be able to do both things. And so if you're Dana White, I've personally always been a fan of it. If Dana White wants to come over to boxing, it's going to be good for boxing. Dana White knows what he's doing. He's an incredible businessman. He's built up something special with the UFC. The UFC is in a great financial situation. TKO as a company is thriving over the past years. Look at the stock. They have been thriving over the past 2 years now. They're in great position. Dana White's done an incredible job with the UFC. There's no reason he cannot do the same job with boxing. The question is you won't be able to do both of them, so which one do you like more? If Dana White wants to remain with the UFC, boxing is not going to be something that he can seriously pursue. Unless you give over the reins of the power to Hunter Campbell with the UFC. And if that's the case, then guess what? It'll be able to be feasible. But doing both of them at the highest level possible is not possible. So you have to ask yourself, what is Dana White really going to want to pursue? Is it the UFC or is it boxing? Because if it's not going to be the route of boxing fully, 100%, it will not work. It will be possible for him to make a big impact on boxing if he's all in. And I am in favor of that. I've said the time and time again. Yes, the payments, yes, all that stuff's going to happen. But if he has Turkey funding and the payments are going to be the payment and Dana White just needs to do the business matchmaking side of things, it's going to be A-okay. But he has to be all in on boxing for this to work. And by the evidence of what we're seeing right now, that he's passing up on the Turkey Al-Sheik's card of Canelo versus Bud Crawford in favor, essentially, of for UFC Yanoche. That's a sign to me that says, you know what, Dana White's not 100% in on boxing. Boxing is still taking a backseat to the UFC. And if that is the case, then his role in boxing is going to be quite limited. And he's not going to be able to reach the points in which I think he's capable of reaching in boxing if he decides to go that way. So he will have to make that decision. Tyson Fury and John Fury are on their way to a business meeting this morning and teasing something incoming today. Listen, I've said this time and time again. It's only a matter of time until we have Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury get announced for Wembley Stadium. That's all I'm going to say about that. Maybe this is in regards to that. Maybe it's not. But regardless of what that situation is, Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua will fight at least one time at Wembley Stadium. There's no other way around it. It makes too much sense for both sides. It's going to happen down the road. The final thing I want to get into today is a quote. And actually, I'm going to start off with a question. Is the amount of money that Turkey Al-Sheikh, Riyadh Season, the Ring Magazine, however you want to put it, is the amount of money that they are paying fighters impacting the way that fights are going down? That's an interesting question to propose there. We have seen time and time again that the cards, for example, Canelo versus William Skull card, the Ring Magazine card that was at Times Square, the fights did not really go well. At least for the A side. We've seen this time and time again. Now, not all of them, but even let's go to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium fight with Conor Ben, Chris Eubank Jr. Yes, we got the potential fight of the year. What about the undercard? That undercard was starting to look up and shake up to be a really bad undercard up until Ben and Jr. saved the night. Now, this is not every single Turkey Al-Sheikh card that this is occurring in. But it makes you question, is the amount of money influencing things? Bob Arum has a statement on that. They, fighters of the past, had a reason to give the crowd an entertaining fight because they made extra money from the pay-per-view and from the gate. So there was always an incentive for them to look good. Now, that incentive is gone because they, Turkey, promised great money for the next fight. And the only sure way they're going to get it to it is to not engage in that fight. That's a very interesting comment there, which I think you could validate to quite a bit. When we look at these guys, I think let's utilize one of the most legitimate examples of this that what Bob Arum was displaying is let's look at the Times Square card in regards to the Devin Haney Ryan Garcia rematch. Both guys were getting paid handsomely to fight on that Friday, and both guys had already signed a contract for them to go and fight in Riyadh Season for the rematch. Devin Haney starts off the show abysmally. Yes, he had a great performance. Yes, he won. I'll give him props for that. But it was not a good showing. It was not a statement that he made whatsoever. And at that point in time, people were saying, oh my goodness, what is going on with Devin Haney? Did he just blow this fight with Ryan Garcia? This does not look good. Garcia's going to destroy him. But then we fast forward a few minutes later and we see Ryan Garcia fight, and he somehow even surpasses how bad Devin Haney fought. Why? For Devin Haney, yes, it's always been something that he's been a part of. We've seen Devin Haney be a part of many boring fights. Ryan Garcia, that's not been the story, though. Why was Ryan Garcia not locked in? Now, there are many reasons you could claim to that statement there, but the answer is that he did not look good. Can we go back to another fight card? December 22nd, December 23rd, 2023, in Riyadh Season, Anthony Joshua fights, does his job against Otto Wall, and so on and so forth. Deontay Wilder comes and does his fight, though, and he loses his fight to Joseph Parker. And in that fight was one of the worst CompuBox punch stats ever given at that point. At that point was the record. And we blow that potential fight with each other. We have seen time and time again these guys are not giving themselves their all. And it's true. The way that Turkey Al-Sheikh is doing business is completely polar opposite to any other way of actually legitimate business. Turkey Al-Sheikh, now I've explained this before, is in this because of a large-scale thing. When you talk about the Saudi Arabia 2030 plan, it's a great plan they have in place, but their point is to make Saudi Arabia the entertainment capital of the world. So for them, that reason is that they have so much money that they're willing to spend on all these different things, whether that be golf, that be soccer, that be boxing, that be F1, that be whatever it might be. They're influencing tons and tons of money to make the entertainment source a lot higher part of the GDP. Or GOP, my apologies. That's what they're trying to go do out there in Saudi Arabia. That's a game plan. It's very, very well known. And I'm all in favor. I don't think why anybody has a thing against that is weird. It makes no sense. It's a great strategy that they're utilizing right now. Turkey Al-Sheikh is one of the main focal points and influence the 2030 plan. And when you look at what they're doing right now, they're willing to lose a lot of money to these fighters so they can get more entertainment sources and more eyes on Saudi Arabia. Therefore, these fighters are getting paid such a handsome amount of money that's unlike anything else. Typically, as Bob Arum points out, you need the pay-per-view, the gate, all these different things are critical, but not with Saudi Arabia cards. The promotion is not going to be as necessary for these fights when you're getting paid such an extreme amount of money just straight up out front for just showing up and fighting in that fight. Business is 100% done different with Turkey Al-Sheikh than it is with any other boxing source in the world. And because of that, it does make you wonder, is that why some of these fights are happening the way it is? I think I can utilize the Conor McGregor source, for example. Dana White gave a perfect explanation as to Conor McGregor. Obviously, for UFC fans, a lot of people want to see Conor McGregor return to the ring. We want to see what he looks like in the ring, or in the octagon, apologies. We want to see what he looks like. But Dana White made a very interesting point about Conor McGregor. That he has reached such a high level amount of money now that it's very, very hard to wake up and want to be punched in the face when you're getting paid the amount of money you have. When you're waking up in a yacht, when you have these mansions all over the place, why do you want to keep going to work and keep fighting, laying your life on the line just for a paycheck? That's not that much in comparison to what you could be bringing in, which you already have. And I think that's a very similar story to what we're seeing right now with some of these Saudi Arabia fighters. Am I opposed to them getting paid these massive bags? Absolutely not. In fact, I'm actually in favor of that. These guys are fighting for a lifestyle and for a living, and they're getting paid that living. But is that impacting the performance and what we're getting to witness as fans for boxing? Absolutely. To some extent, it has to. We can't deny the fact that at the end of the day, fighters are getting paid money, extreme amounts of money, and it makes them wanting to take punches and go fight a lot less appealing to them. When you're a guy that, when Forbes made a list a little bit ago about the most highest paid athletes of 2024, you had 3 boxers that were ranked within the top 7, I believe, top 8, I think it was. All of which were pressing near or upwards to 60 plus to $100 million. That's a lot of money. And if you're waking up with these massive mansions and you have these luxurious places and you're getting paid this massive amount of money, does getting punched really make you want to keep doing this? And especially when you have other deals set in place that are saying, you know what, we have another big fight line for you if you win this fight. Why would you want to go in there and go to war with a guy when you don't need that? I think the difference point is I made one fight that I said is yes, potential fight of the year that was associated with Turkey Al-Sheikh was the Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn fight. But there was something different in that fight. That fight was not just about money. Both guys got paid handsomely. But there was something different about that fight card. Why? There was a personal grudge between the two guys. A history. There was true rivalry built up within that fight. And that rivalry made it brew into the fight that it was. That at that point in time, that rivalry meant more to those guys than money did. And that's why we saw the fight that we saw. But are we going to continue to witness these subpar, unentertaining fights in boxing going forward with Turkey Al-Sheikh cards? I'm not sure. Now, you might ask me then, well, am I in favor of saying that Turkey Al-Sheikh's got to go away from boxing? No. At the end of the day, as I said, fighters are in here to make money, make a living. And he's paying them handsomely. What needs to happen is that fighters need to be hungry. Is it possible? I don't know. But fighters don't need to lose money for no reason. Still, big fights are getting made. And at the end of the day, we are seeing things like obviously the Dimitri Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev fights have been phenomenal. Usyk Fury have been phenomenal. There have been good fights. I just have to wonder, though, is what we're currently witnessing with these current fight cards going down something that's going to be a continuing track record? Or will guys start to value fights more and more? I don't know. But what I will say is that, no, Turkey Al-Sheikh is good for boxing. But at the same time, fighters need to take more advantage of what their positions they're in right now and go make their money's worth. And also worry about the legacy a little bit more. Because if you are Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney, that big fight is likely out the window now. So you still are hurting yourself financially. Only time will tell how the results end up compiling for this data. But listen, it is something to definitely keep an eye on. And I do think Bob Arum is onto something here. Now it's up to the fighters to decide if they want to continue to earn that big money that Turkey is paying out. Because that's to be determined. Well, I do appreciate each and every single one of you guys for tuning in to today's show. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday. I will see you guys back tomorrow. Almost every show, I believe, this week will actually be right around 12 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. I'm not sure what time that's going to be at where you're listening. But I appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Once again, I hope you guys have a blessed rest of your guys' Monday. I will see you guys tomorrow. May God bless you guys all. And SchuZ is out. See you guys tomorrow.